In April 2021, two people drove into the hottest desert in North America to spend one night camping. 6 days later, only one of them came out alive. They weren't reckless tourists. They weren't inexperienced hikers chasing Instagram photos. They were a young couple, a combat veteran and his girlfriend, who had spent 2 years exploring the American Southwest together. They had camped dozens of times. They knew the terrain. They left detailed plans with their families. One rock in the road, 2 flat tires, a decision that seemed sensible at the time. Alexander Lofgren fell 70 feet to his death. Emily Henkel shattered her ankle trying to reach him. Then she spent 6 days on a desert cliffside next to his body, waiting to be found or to die. This is not a cautionary tale about preparation. They were prepared. This is a story about what happens when everything goes wrong anyway. Alexander Lofgren was 32 years old. He grew up in Tucson, Arizona, enlisted in the Army after high school, and served as a combat engineer in Afghanistan. He came home different, the way soldiers often do. The desert, the American desert, not the one where he had fought, became his therapy. After leaving the military in 2012, Lofgren dedicated his life to helping other veterans. He took a position as a caseworker in the Tucson office of Congressman Raul Grijalva, specializing in veterans affairs. According to his colleagues, he met with struggling vets daily, helping them navigate the bureaucratic maze of benefits and services. He understood their problems because he carried his own. Emily Henkel was 27. She was from Cincinnati, Ohio, but had moved to Arizona. She and Lofgren met sometime in 2018 or 2019. Sources differ on the exact timeline, and quickly discovered they shared a love for the same thing: wild places far from other people. Every weekend, they drove somewhere. Saguaro National Park, Petrified Forest, Organ Pipe Cactus. They had plans to visit Valley of the Gods in Utah. Lofgren wanted to marry her there. What colleagues and friends remember most about Lofgren was his eyes when he entered a new park. According to Emily's later interviews, he would get this look of absolute wonderment and complete awe. The outdoors wasn't just recreation for him. It was medication. It was the thing that kept him functional after Afghanistan. On Saturday, April 3, 2021, they loaded their white Subaru Forester and drove north from Tucson toward Death Valley National Park. They planned one night of camping. They would be home Sunday, April 4th, for Easter dinner with family. They filed a backcountry itinerary with the Park Service. They told multiple family members exactly where they were going. They did everything right. Death Valley is the hottest place on Earth. On July 10, 1913, thermometers at Furnace Creek recorded 134 degrees Fahrenheit, the highest air temperature ever officially measured anywhere on the planet. Summer days routinely exceed 120 degrees. Ground temperatures have reached 201 degrees. The park covers 3.4 million acres, making it larger than the states of Rhode Island and Delaware combined. It contains the lowest point in North America, Badwater Basin, at 282 feet below sea level. 20 miles west of that basin, Telescope Peak rises to 11,049 feet. The elevation change is extreme. The terrain is jagged, crumbling, and ancient. Death Valley is also one of the driest places in North America, averaging less than 2 inches of rainfall per year. The Panamint Range to the west blocks moisture from the Pacific. The Amargosa Range to the east blocks moisture from anywhere else. What falls into the valley stays in the valley and evaporates almost immediately. April is considered one of the safer months to visit. Daytime temperatures in early April typically range from 80 to 95 degrees, hot but survivable. Nights drop into the 50s or 60s. Spring wildflowers sometimes bloom. The crushing heat of summer has not yet arrived, but safer is relative. In April, daytime temperatures can still reach 100 degrees without warning. There is no shade in most of the park. Cell phone service is non-existent in remote areas. GPS devices often fail in the canyons. Many of the roads are unpaved, rocky, and designed to destroy tires. The Timbisha Shoshone people have lived in and around Death Valley for at least 1,000 years. They call the area Tumpasa, meaning rock paint, for the red ochre found in the valley. They survived by moving seasonally between elevations, following water sources and game. They knew which plants were edible, which springs were reliable, which routes through the mountains were passable. The European-American settlers who arrived in 1849 had none of this knowledge. A group of pioneers seeking a shortcut to the California gold fields became lost in the valley during winter. One member died. As they finally escaped, one woman reportedly looked back and said, "Goodbye, Death Valley." The name stuck. The Park Service estimates that several people die in Death Valley every year. Most are tourists who underestimate the heat or overestimate their vehicles. Search and rescue operations are common. Recovery of bodies is sometimes impossible. According to Emily Henkel's interviews, given to podcasts, newspapers, and a documentary after her rescue, she and Alex arrived in Death Valley on Saturday, April 3rd. They drove their Subaru down Gold Valley Road, an unpaved route in a remote section of the park, far from the tourist areas around Furnace Creek. Somewhere along that road, they hit a rock. The impact shredded 2 tires, not 1. 2. They had a spare, but a spare only solves the problem of 1 flat tire. With 2 destroyed, the car was immobilized. They were miles from any paved road, miles from cell service, miles from other people. According to the note they left on the windshield, they had approximately 3 days' worth of water. They considered their options. They could stay with the car and wait for someone to find them, which might take days since they were off their filed itinerary, or they could hike to find help. Lofgren looked at a map. He saw a place called Mormon Point on the highway to the east. According to later analysis by desert survival experts, he probably assumed Mormon Point was a town or settlement. It is not. It is a geographic feature, a spot where, centuries ago, a Mormon traveler allegedly pointed at something and moved on. There is nothing there but rock and highway. The couple decided to hike through Willow Creek Canyon toward what they believed was civilization. It was approximately 2 miles away, but those 2 miles involved steep canyon walls, crumbling rock, and drops that were difficult to see until you were standing at the edge. They left a note on the car. 2 flat tires headed to Mormon Point have 3 days' worth of water. That note would later save Emily's life. On Sunday morning, April 4th, Emily and Alex hiked into Willow Creek Canyon. According to Emily's account, they followed a designated trail down a slot canyon. The terrain became progressively more difficult. At one point, they reached a 70-foot cliff with a dry waterfall dropping into the canyon below. They needed to find a way down. Lofgren went first. He was an experienced outdoorsman, a veteran who had navigated difficult terrain in Afghanistan. He found what he thought was a route along the cliff face. Then he lost his grip. Emily watched him fall. 70 feet. His body hit the rocks below. She did not hesitate. She climbed down after him, trying to reach the spot where he had landed. Partway down, she fell as well. Her ankle shattered on impact, a severe break that would require extensive surgery. Despite her injury, she reached Alex. He was alive, but barely. His injuries were catastrophic. According to her interviews, she ran her fingers across his forehead and through his hair as he took his last breaths. She told him she loved him. She held him until he stopped breathing. He died approximately 30 minutes after the fall. Let me describe exactly what Emily Henkel faced after Alexander Lofgren died. She was trapped on a steep ledge in an impassable canyon. Her ankle was shattered. She could not walk, could not climb back up the cliff, could not hike out to the road. The nearest human being was miles away. No one would be expecting her to return until that evening. And even then, it would take days before search parties reached this specific location. She had water, but not much. She had a small solar panel, a Goal Zero Nomad 5, that could charge her phone and headlamp. The phone was useless for communication in this remote canyon with no cell signal, but the headlamp would prove essential for signaling at night if aircraft flew overhead. She had no food to speak of. She had no way to move, and she had Alex's body beside her. The temperatures in Death Valley in early April swing wildly between day and night. During the day, the sun could push temperatures into the 90s or higher, baking the exposed rock ledge where Emily lay. At night, temperatures dropped into the 50s, not freezing, but cold enough to cause discomfort and hypothermia risk for someone who could not move to generate warmth. Desert survival experts estimate that a healthy person can survive approximately 3 days without water in temperatures above 90 degrees. Emily had water, so dehydration was not the immediate threat. The immediate threats were injury complications, infection, blood clots, shock, as well as exposure, dehydration as her supply dwindled, and psychological collapse. Modern psychology research indicates that witnessing the death of a loved one typically produces acute stress responses: shock, dissociation, intrusive memories, emotional numbing. These symptoms are amplified by physical isolation and compounded by physical pain. The brain, lacking other humans to regulate against, can spiral into terror, paralysis, or irrational decision-making. Studies of disaster survivors suggest that the majority of people who die in survival situations succumb not to physical conditions, but to psychological surrender, giving up before their bodies give out. Emily chose a different path. In her interviews, she describes making a conscious decision to survive, not because she particularly wanted to, in those first hours, but because she felt she owed it to Alex. If she died, his death would mean nothing. If she lived, she could carry his story forward. She rationed her water carefully. She used the solar panel to keep her headlamp charged. She waited. Days passed. 1, then 2, then 3. She lost track. The sun rose and set. The temperatures climbed during the day and dropped at night. She could not move from her position on the ledge. According to her account, she talked to Alex's body sometimes, not constantly. She understood that might indicate psychological deterioration, but occasionally, just to hear a human voice, even if it was only her own. She watched the sky for helicopters. She listened for voices. Nothing came. Back in Tucson and with Emily's family, people were growing worried. Emily and Alex had been due home on Easter Sunday, April 4th. When they didn't arrive, family members initially assumed they had decided to extend their trip, but by Monday, they still had not made contact. By Tuesday, April 6th, the concern became alarm. Emily's family contacted the Inyo County Sheriff's Office and reported the couple missing. Search and rescue operations began on April 7th. The challenge was the size of the search area. Death Valley contains 3.4 million acres. The couple's backcountry itinerary listed certain locations, but their car was not at any of them. Searchers checked every hotel in the park. They checked every attraction along Highway 190. They found nothing. On April 8th, an aircraft conducting aerial reconnaissance spotted the white Subaru Forester on Gold Valley Road, miles from the couple's planned route. The note on the windshield provided the crucial information: Mormon Point. 3 days of water, headed east. The searchers now knew which direction to look, but reaching the area where Emily and Alex might be required helicopters, and the terrain was so steep and unstable that initial hoist operations failed. 2 rescuers rappelled down toward the ledge where 2 figures had been spotted from the air, but the rock faces were too crumbling and vertical. They could not reach the position safely. It was unclear from the air whether either person was still alive. The Inyo County Sheriff's Office coordinated with multiple agencies: the Naval Air Weapons Station at China Lake, Lemoore Naval Air Station, the Army National Guard, the Bureau of Land Management, and the California Highway Patrol. This was, according to Sheriff Jeff Hollowell, a tremendously difficult operation in a very unforgiving geographic area. On the morning of April 9th, 6 days after the accident, Inyo County search and rescue team members finally reached the ledge on foot, hiking through the night to approach from a different angle. Alexander Lofgren was dead. He had been dead since April 4th. Emily Henkel was alive. Barely. She was severely dehydrated, her ankle was destroyed, and she had spent nearly a week next to her partner's body, but she was breathing. A helicopter from Lemoore Naval Air Station hoisted her off the ledge and flew her to medical treatment. The immediate aftermath was medical crisis. Emily's ankle required extensive surgery. The bones had been shattered, not merely broken. Recovery would take months, possibly years. She would likely never walk the same way again. But the physical injury was almost secondary to the psychological damage. Emily later described the experience to interviewers as watching the world shatter before my eyes. She had lost not just her partner, but her entire future, the wedding they had planned, the plant nursery they wanted to open together, the parks they intended to visit. All of it had been reduced to what she called millions of sandstone dust particles in a single breath. She experienced symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress, nightmares, flashbacks, difficulty being in desert environments. For months, she could not enter the outdoors without panic responses. But Emily Henkel did not retreat permanently from the wild places she and Alex had loved. Within a year, she was camping again. Within 2 years, she had purchased a camper van and spent nearly a year traveling the Southwest United States by herself, collecting national park passport stamps in Alex's memory. She visited parks they had explored together. She visited parks they had only dreamed about. She kept the tradition alive. And something else happened, something that gave meaning to the tragedy. Before his death, Alexander Lofgren had been working on legislation that would provide free national park access to veterans and Gold Star families. He believed, from personal experience, that nature was therapeutic. He wanted other veterans to have the same opportunity for healing that he had found. After his death, Congressman Grijalva and others pushed the legislation forward. On December 27, 2021, 8 months after Alex's death, President Biden signed the Alexander Lofgren Veterans in Parks Act into law. Veterans and Gold Star families now receive free lifetime access to all national parks and federal lands. Alex never saw it happen, but Emily did. This story resists easy interpretation. It is not a simple warning about inadequate preparation. Emily and Alex were prepared. They had water, they had gear, they left detailed notes, they filed itineraries, they did what experts recommend. It is not a story about foolish risk-taking. Hiking 2 miles to what they believed was a road seemed reasonable given their circumstances. Staying with a disabled car in a location off their itinerary might have meant waiting a week or more for discovery. It is not a story with a clear villain. The rock that shredded their tires was just a rock. The cliff that killed Alex was just geology. The desert is not malicious. It simply does not care whether humans live or die. What this story reveals is something uncomfortable about wilderness travel. Sometimes everything goes wrong anyway. Sometimes you make the right calls and still end up dead. Sometimes the margin between survival and tragedy is a loose handhold, a crumbling rock, a single misstep. Desert survival expert Cody London, who analyzed this case for a preparedness publication, noted that people die in the desert constantly, from small mistakes compounding into catastrophe. It's not the real big thing that will take you out, he observed. It's the little teeny things like we forgot the water or we took the wrong turn, the spare tire is flat. Emily survived because she and Alex told people where they were going. The note on the car pointed searchers in the right direction. Without that communication, she would almost certainly have died on that ledge. But Alex died because communication could not prevent a fall. No amount of preparation stops gravity. The uncomfortable question this story asks is, what do you do when you have done everything right and catastrophe finds you anyway? Emily Hinkle's answer was to keep living, not easily, not without tremendous pain, but deliberately. She chose to survive because survival was the only way to give Alex's death meaning, to pass his legislation, to visit his parks, to tell his story. She did not seek that cliffside vigil. It was forced upon her. That she endured says less about heroism than about the human capacity to keep breathing when breathing is the only option left. She spent 6 days next to the body of the man she loved, waiting for rescue that might never come. Each of those days, she decided to survive one more time. And that decision, repeated 6 times in absolute isolation, is why her story ended differently than his. If this story challenges how you think about risk and preparation, consider supporting the channel, subscribe, share with someone who explores wild places, and join us for more true stories of survival at the edges of what humans can endure.